Hi, I'm Alindra Kayleys. On Christmas Eve, something happened that I never imagined could happen to me. My parents opened the big, heavy front door of our huge mansion in Hillsborough and threw my only suitcase onto the frozen marble steps outside. I couldn't believe it. My little sister, Zephyra, stood right behind them, arms crossed, grinning from ear to ear like she had just won the biggest prize in the world. "Let's see how you survive now, big sis," she said, her voice full of happiness for her but cruelty for me. I felt my heart sink. I dragged my suitcase through the thick, icy fog that covered our neighborhood. My fingers were already turning red from the cold. I had no money, no car, nothing left. The only thing keeping me alive was the long cashmere coat I wore, which was soft and warm against the freezing wind. Finally, I collapsed onto a park bench that was lightly covered in snow. I was shaking so badly that my teeth would not stop chattering. I felt hopeless, alone, and completely frozen. Then out of nowhere she appeared. An old woman, barefoot, with skin turning purple from the cold, and silver hair flying in the icy wind. She looked like the snow and cold had already claimed her. Without thinking, I stood up, took off my warm coat, and wrapped it around her thin, trembling shoulders. She held my freezing hands in hers, looked straight into my eyes, and whispered, "Kindness like yours is rarer than diamonds." Then she turned and slowly walked away, disappearing into the thick fog like a ghost. Exactly 1 hour later, I saw 19 black luxury cars arrive in perfect silence. They blocked the street completely. Out of the middle car stepped the same old woman. She looked exactly the same at first, but now she wore a long, elegant camel-colored coat, and her hair was neat and shiny. Diamonds sparkled on her wrist in the light. She walked straight to me, smiled, and said only one sentence. "I've been watching you long enough to know who you really are." She told me to write in the comments, "Been there," or the city I was watching from, if I had ever been treated badly by the people who were supposed to love me. She said this so she could know that I wasn't alone. She told me to keep watching because what would happen next would surprise me. That afternoon, my world had already started falling apart. I had just received an email at 10 a.m. saying I was laid off from my job. My ad agency in San Francisco, where I had worked for 6 years, was letting people go again. My desk plant sat quietly on my passenger seat as I drove my 12-year-old Honda Civic south on Highway 101 toward Hillsborough. If traffic was kind, it would take about 3 hours and 47 minutes, but traffic was never kind that day. I called my mom from a parking garage. "I just need a place to crash for a couple of weeks while I figure things out," I said. She sounded distracted. "Dinner's at 7. She said, and hung up before I could say more. When I finally reached the gates of our mansion, it looked like a picture from a magazine. The foyer was huge, with a 15-foot noble fir Christmas tree reaching almost to the ceiling. White orchids were everywhere, their petals delicate and pure. The caterers were dressed in black suits, setting a dining table for 20 people, making everything look perfect. My dad, Thayer, was uncorking a 2005 Dom Perignon champagne bottle like it was just another ordinary Tuesday. Mom, Seraphine, was fastening a new pearl necklace that had definitely not been there last month. And Zephyra, my 27-year-old little sister, was twirling in a backless red silk dress, showing off a 6-carat diamond ring on her left hand, as if she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. Lucian, my ex-boyfriend of 4 years, stood behind her with his arm around her waist. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and tried to smile. "Hey everyone, bad day at work," I said quietly, trying to sound normal. Zephyr spun around and gasped, pretending to be shocked. "Oh my God, again," she said, loud enough for the caterers to hear. "Third job in 4 years, right?" He turned to Mom. "Remember when she got fired from the startup in Soma for not being a team player?" Mom's lips tightened. Dad didn't even look up from his champagne. My face burned. It wasn't because I hadn't done a good job. It was a reduction in force. The company let go of the entire creative team. But Zephyra waved her ring in my direction as if she was winning some cruel game. Lucian gave me that same smug half-smile he used when he broke up with me 2 years ago. "It's not you, it's timing," he had said then, and now I felt the same sting again. Dad finally put his glass down. "Murian, we need to talk," he said without motioning for me to sit. He had already told me last month that he had amended the family trust. All $38 million of it was now in Zephyr's name only. Irrevocable. Signed, notarized, filed with the estate attorney in Palo Alto. He said I was 32, capable, and it was time for me to stand on my own. Mom added, We can't keep funding a lifestyle that doesn't produce results, as if my salary ever paid for their orchids or Zephyr's Birkenstocks. I stood there, mouth open, realizing that my own parents had just legally disinherited me while I was still standing in their grand foyer. Zephyr pulled out her phone, already recording. "This is gold. Big sis comes home broke on Christmas Eve. Say something for my followers." I looked at Dad. "You're serious?" I asked. He met my eyes, cold and final. "You have 20 minutes to pack what you need. Security will let you back in tomorrow for the rest if you make an appointment." Mom didn't even look at me, busy adjusting a golden ornament on the tree as if I didn't exist. I walked upstairs, my legs heavy like lead. My bedroom, the one I had since I was 10, still had my high school swim team photos on the wall. I quickly packed a few things. Jeans, 2 sweaters, my laptop, and toiletries into my old Louis Vuitton weekender bag. Everything else, books, yearbooks, and even my framed Stanford diploma, would have to wait. Zephyr hadn't taken them yet, but I didn't know if I'd ever get them back. When I came downstairs, Zephyr was live on Instagram, narrating everything like she was watching animals in the wild. And here comes the prodigal daughter with one sad suitcase. Any bets on how long before she sleeps in that Civic? Dad opened the front door himself. The fog rolled in thick and I couldn't see the end of the driveway. The temperature had already dropped below freezing. I stepped over the threshold and behind me Zephyr called out, "Sweet as poison. Merry Christmas, Murianne. Don't freeze." The door closed with a soft, expensive click. The alarm beeped twice as it was armed. Just like that, in under 30 minutes I went from being a daughter to being a trespasser in the only home I had ever known. I stood on the marble steps in the dark, one suitcase at my feet, wearing the only warm thing I owned, that long cashmere coat. Everything went quiet except for the pounding of my blood in my ears. I tried to breathe, but the air felt like knives cutting my lungs. My mind kept replaying Dad's flat, final voice, 38 million gone with one signature. I stood there in shock, realizing that in one conversation, I had become a stranger to the only family I had ever had. I started walking because standing still felt worse. The wheels on my suitcase rattled over the smooth pavement. Every mansion I passed had warm, golden windows and laughter spilling out around glowing Christmas trees. Each one reminded me that I no longer belonged anywhere. My fingers were already numb. I kept thinking, this can't be real. Any minute Mom will open the door and call me back saying it's a cruel joke. But no, the alarm stayed armed. No footsteps, nothing. I don't know how long I walked, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour, until I found myself in the little public garden beside the old Episcopal church. There was one iron bench under a street lamp that actually worked. I sat down hard, dropped my suitcase and finally let the tears come. I cried for the little girl who used to hide under that 15-foot Christmas tree waiting for Santa. I cried for every birthday when Zephyr got the bigger present and I was told to be grateful. I cried because I had always believed that if I just worked harder, achieved more, my parents would finally see me. But none of it mattered. I wasn't disposable because I failed. I was disposable because I wasn't Zephyr. The tears froze on my cheeks. I hugged my knees to my chest and stared at the ground, trying to figure out how I would survive the night, let alone the rest of my life. Then I heard slow scraping footsteps on the concrete. I looked up and saw her, the old woman. Her hair was silver and messy, her thin shoulders hunched, and her skin so pale it almost looked see-through under the lamp. She stopped a few feet away and spoke in a voice rough from the cold. "Young lady, do you know if any shelters still have room tonight? I've been walking from Burlingame and everything is full." I wiped my face quickly. "I'm sorry. No, I don't have anywhere either," I said. She studied me for a long moment, her eyes sharp despite her exhaustion. Then she lowered herself onto the bench beside me, leaving a careful distance. We sat in silence while her breathing steadied. I noticed her bare feet were purple, and it looked like the frost had already started to hurt her. Something inside me cracked open. Here was someone who had even less than I did tonight, and she was still polite enough to ask instead of demanding. I felt ashamed of my own self-pity. Without saying anything, I stood up, slipped off the only warm thing keeping me from freezing, and draped it around her shoulders. She looked startled, then closed her eyes as the warmth hit her. Her hands, thin and trembling, reached up and pulled the fabric tighter. Her pale blue eyes filled with tears. "What's your name, child?" she asked. "Elindra," I answered, my voice cracking. She repeated it softly, like she was tasting something precious. Thank you, Alindra. Then she did something I'll never forget. She took both my icy hands in hers, squeezed once, and held my gaze for a long time. No words were spoken, but I felt a connection, an understanding passing between us. Two strangers suddenly weren't strangers anymore. After what felt like forever, she let go. She stood up with new steadiness and gave me the smallest, gentlest smile. Then she walked away, slowly swallowed by the night, before I could even think to call after her. I sat back down in the small motel room all by myself. The air felt colder than anything I had ever felt in my whole life. My teeth were chattering so hard that my jaw hurt. I wrapped my arms around myself, but it didn't help much. My fingers felt numb. But even though I was freezing, the heavy feeling in my chest that had been sitting there since the door closed earlier that day suddenly felt lighter. It was strange, like giving away the last thing I had somehow gave me something warm inside that I didn't know I needed. It was as if helping someone else had given me a tiny piece of happiness I had been missing all along. The motel room smelled funny, like old cigarettes and cheap pine cleaner. I had been sitting there for hours staring at the same job page on the computer. I clicked on every single job that paid more than the smallest amount of money you could imagine. My fingers were sore from typing and clicking so much. Then suddenly my phone rang. The number was strange. I didn't recognize it at all. Miss Alindra Kaylees? A woman's voice said on the phone. Her voice was crisp and very professional, but there was a tiny bit of an East Coast accent. This is Celine Maris, she said. I'm calling for Mrs. Aurelia Thorne. She wants to meet you right now. I laughed out loud. Sounded like a prank. Who is this really? I asked. The line stayed quiet for 2 whole seconds. Mrs. Thorne will explain everything. A car is waiting outside room 112, the woman finally said. I peeked through the little hole in the door. My eyes widened. There were 19 black BMWs in the parking lot, all lined up like a presidential motorcade. They were shiny and perfect, all parked in a straight line. The door of the first car opened by itself. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed my keys and walked outside, wearing the same jeans and hoodie I had been wearing for 2 days. I didn't care about looking nice, I was too surprised. And there she was, the woman from the bench. Her hair was now in a perfect low bun. She wore a long camel-colored coat tied at the waist, and her red high-heeled shoes sparkled in the sunlight. She looked like she was 78 years old, but at the same time she didn't look old at all. Come on, she said gently, like she already knew me very well. I got in the car. The door closed softly with a thud and a window partition lifted. We started moving slowly down the road. After about 20 minutes, massive gates opened, and we drove up to a huge 1920s Tudor mansion hidden in Atherton. Tall redwood trees and a hedge at least 10 feet high blocked the view from the street. I had driven past this street so many times in my life and never even knew this place existed. Inside the house, it smelled like cedar wood and fresh roses. A big fire crackled in a stone fireplace that was so large, you could almost stand inside it. Huge windows from the floor to the ceiling looked out over a private lake. She motioned for me to sit on a cream-colored sofa that looked like it could cost more than my entire car. A butler came and poured tea into fancy cups, but neither of us touched it. My full name is Aurelia Thorne, she said, her voice soft but strong. My husband started Thorne Commercial Realty. When he died 12 years ago, I took over the company and turned all the money into the Thorne Family Foundation. We own or pay for more than 400 million square feet of offices and stores across the country. Our foundation gives away about $120 million every single year. I just stared. My brain couldn't even imagine numbers that big. They were too huge. She leaned forward. Every Christmas Eve for 25 years I do the same thing. I leave this big house dressed like someone who has nothing. I don't have any visible security guards. I don't carry a wallet or phone. I walk around until I find someone who still has kindness in their heart when they think no one is watching. Most years I walk all night and go home disappointed. Sir, I found you. She told me that after I walked away that Christmas Eve, her secret security team had been watching me from far away for 2 whole days. They saw me check into the motel with cash. They saw me eat from the vending machine. They watched me apply for 50 jobs in one sitting. They even saw me cry quietly in the shower. But I never asked them who she was or tried to brag about helping someone. You are the first person in 15 years, she said quietly. The first person who gave away the last thing keeping them alive without hoping to get anything back. I need to know if that was just an accident, or if that's who you truly are. She stood up and walked to the window, her hands clasped behind her back. I have no children, she said. No one will take over when I die. If I do nothing, strangers on a board will decide where all my money goes. I don't want that. I want someone who understands what it feels like to be thrown away on Christmas Eve. Someone who can help the next person who is lost and lonely. I think that person is you. She turned to face me. I'm offering you a room here, a salary, and a 5-year apprenticeship. If at the end you are the person I believe you are, the foundation will be yours to run. Not as a gift, as a responsibility. I opened my mouth to ask, why me? But no words came out at first. Finally I whispered, why me? Her eyes became bright and fierce. Because I know exactly what it feels like to sit on a freezing bench with nowhere to go and still choose kindness. I was 29 when my own father left me on Christmas Eve. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would make sure no one who chose right in that moment stayed lost. That's why you. She extended her hand. So, Elindra Kaylees, will you come home with me? I moved into the east wing of the mansion the following Monday. My new bedroom was bigger than my parents' entire downstairs. French doors opened to a rose garden that I could smell from my bed. Celine Maris, tall, silver-haired and very serious, handed me a huge leather binder that was as thick as a phone book. Welcome to boot camp, she said. The first month was really hard. At 6 o'clock in the morning, we ran around the lake with a former Navy SEAL trainer. At 7:30, breakfast meetings taught me how to read tax papers faster than most accountants. From 9 in the morning until 6 at night, I sat beside Aurelia in board meetings at the Foundation's offices on Sand Hill Road, taking notes while billionaires argued over numbers and rules. Evenings were spent going through 20 years of old grant papers. My eyes burned from reading so much. Aurelia didn't want a spoiled rich kid pretending to be helpful. She wanted someone who could take money and turn it into real help for people without wasting even a little. We don't give fish, Aurelia would say. We don't even give fishing lessons. We buy the whole river and make sure everyone can eat forever. She got me into Stanford Graduate School of Business, paying for everything. 3 nights a week I drove to class and learned how to measure real results, not just intentions. Weekends meant visiting battered women's shelters in East Oakland, after-school programs in East San Jose, and veteran housing in the Central Valley. I listened to mothers who had escaped abuse with nothing but their kids and a garbage bag of clothes. I listened to teenagers explain how just one safe place to do homework stopped them from joining gangs. Every story carved itself into my heart. Back at the mansion, Celine taught me about governance. She explained how to handle a board member who didn't follow the rules, how to say no to a senator's favorite project without losing federal funding, and how to fire someone who stole money without causing a big scandal. I rewrote the whole grant application process. Shorter forms, faster decisions, mandatory site visits within 30 days of approval. Aurelia read every draft, marked it in red ink, and made me defend each change in front of the whole board. Some nights, I fell asleep on the kitchen island with my face on a spreadsheet. Some mornings, I cried in the shower because I felt like an imposter who would never be good enough. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered sitting on that freezing bench with nothing and kept going. June came hot and sudden. One Thursday morning, Aurelia texted, "Library. Now." I walked in, expecting another 12-hour strategy session. Instead, she was alone, sunlight pouring through stained glass windows, holding a single folder. She didn't sit. She pushed the folder across the mahogany table toward me. Inside was an employment agreement written on heavy cream-colored paper. The title, President and Chief Executive Officer, Thorne Family Foundation. I would report directly to the board, meaning Aurelia, until she decided otherwise. The salary was $195,000. 3% equity in the foundation's endowment, currently valued just under $4 billion. Full decision-making authority over all programs starting year 3. I looked up, speechless. Aurelia finally sat, folding her hands like she was praying. "I didn't bring you here because you gave away a coat," she said. "Anyone can be generous for 5 minutes when a camera might be watching. I watched you for 5 straight months. I watched you fight for a domestic violence shelter everyone wanted to defund. I watched you sit on a folding chair until midnight listening to a 17-year-old girl explain why she couldn't go home. I watched you rewrite a 70-page policy manual because one paragraph would have left transgender kids without beds. You have the mind I need and the heart I lost a long time ago. The foundation is yours to run. I'll stay on the board to keep the old man in line, but the river is yours now. I tried to say thank you, but nothing came out. He waved it off. Sign it before I change my mind and make you finish the endowment tax module first, she joked. I laughed through my tears and signed. That night, we opened a bottle of 1982 Chateau Margaux on the terrace. Just the two of us watching the sun drop behind the redwoods. She raised her glass. To the girl who had every reason to become bitter and chose kindness anyway, she said. I clinked my glass against hers. And to the woman who refused to let one good deed stay invisible, I said. We drank. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. October in San Francisco smelled like wet leaves and money. I was in my corner office on the 22nd floor of 300 California Street, reviewing the final numbers for the second home campus, when Celine knocked once and opened the door. Your sister and Lucien Vassar are downstairs. No appointment, she said. I felt my stomach drop the same way it used to when Tara borrowed my clothes in high school and returned them ruined. I told security to send them up. They walked in looking like they had practiced saying sorry on the elevator. Zephyra wore a plain navy dress instead of her usual tight clothes. Her hair was tied back in a low ponytail and she wore very little jewelry. She looked small and careful. Derek had traded his hoodie and sneakers for a navy suit that almost fit. Both of them had nervous smiles, like they had spent hours in the mirror practicing what to say. They looked like kids about to get in trouble, except they were grown-ups who had caused a lot of trouble. Zephyr spoke first. Her voice was soft and her eyes looked shiny like they were about to cry. Murian, we've been awful. I'm so sorry for everything. For Christmas Eve, for the things I posted, for everything. Derek nodded quickly, almost too much. We're getting married next spring and we're trying to do things the right way this time, he said. I stayed behind my desk, my hands folded, waiting quietly. I wanted to see what they would say next. Zephyr took a deep breath. Dad is in trouble. Some of his investments went bad. He and Mom might lose the house. And Lucien's new company, AI for Elderly Care, needs $2 million to finish its first funding. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Which part is life or death? The mortgage or your company's valuation? Lucien tried to laugh, but it sounded forced. Look, I know you're rich now, but blood is blood, right? $2 million is nothing to your foundation. I leaned back in my chair. I wanted them to understand something very clearly. Tell me what happened to the $38 million you took from the trust fund last December, I said calmly. Zephyr blinked like she had forgotten for a second. We diversified in crypto and NFTs, and some angel deals my friends were running. It was supposed to grow 10 times bigger. Then FTX collapsed. Luna went to zero and most of it's gone, she said quickly, almost nervously. Lucien jumped in. The market went down. It happens to everyone. Even big companies lose money. Sequoia lost billions too. We just need a bridge, he said. I opened a folder Celine had quietly placed on my desk. Inside were screenshots, bank records, and an article about how the Cayley's family spent their inheritance on memecoins. I turned the folder so they could see. 87% of the money was gone in just 11 months. I said calmly, you bought Lamborghinis, put deposits on condos in Miami, and paid people to promote worthless coins. That's not a downturn. That's burning money. That is called arson, not bad luck. Zephyr's calm mask slipped. Her face turned red. You're seriously going to sit there in your fancy office and let Mom and Dad go homeless? I pressed the intercom. Security, please come to floor 22. Lucien tried one last time. Come on, Murian. $2 million is nothing to you. You'll never even miss it, he said. The door opened and 2 guards in suits walked in. I stood up. This foundation is for people who never had a safety net. Not for people who burned theirs and now want mine. You're not getting a single dime. Not today. Not ever. Zephyr turned bright red with anger. You ungrateful. She was already pulling out her phone to record as the guards gently took her by the elbows and led her out. By the time they reached the lobby, 3 paparazzi vans and a local gossip blogger were waiting outside the glass doors. Someone had tipped them off. Zephyr cried and shouted, performing for the cameras. She said I was cold-hearted and wouldn't help our parents. The video hit TikTok in just 20 minutes. The caption read, "My billionaire sister won't help our parents keep their house. Family first is a lie." It blew up online. 10 million people watched in just 6 hours. But then the internet remembered the past. Old classmates posted yearbook photos of Zephyr being mean. Someone found the Christmas Eve video where she laughed while I carried my suitcase. A former nanny spoke about how Zephyr used to lock me out in the rain as a joke. Comments flipped from sympathy to anger. People were furious. Lucian's startup deck also leaked. It turned out the AI elderly care company was mostly fake. Investors stopped talking to him. Zephyr's wedding planner canceled because she hadn't paid. Their engagement announcement post got ignored by everyone. I didn't post a single word. By midnight, the TikTok video was age-restricted for bullying. The blogger apologized and Zephyr lost half of her followers. "Celine poured me a finger of scotch when I got back to Atherton that night," I said quietly. "Poetic justice tastes better when you don't have to lift a finger," she said softly. I raised my glass to the dark window. "No," I answered. "It tastes like closure. Not happiness, not revenge, just closure." In November, more bad news came. Pacific Crest Capital, a big investment company, collapsed. My dad had moved every remaining dollar into that fund, including Mom's jewelry, hoping the guaranteed 18% annual return would get them back on track. But the promised returns never came. The FBI raided their offices. The founder had already run away on a yacht somewhere far away. 30 days later, the foreclosure notice appeared on the Hillsborough mansion's front door. No one came to buy it. The bank took the house. Thayer, Seraphine, and Zephyr moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment above a nail salon on Story Road in East San Jose. Rent was $2,900 a month, all they could afford. After the bankruptcy, Zephyr's credit cards were maxed out at $247,000, mostly spent on handbags and shopping to cope with the stress. Collection agencies called and showed up non-stop. One rainy Thursday morning, they came to the foundation without an appointment. Security called me. I told them to let the 3 of them in. Dad looked 20 years older. His hair was completely white and his shoulders were bent. He wore a jacket that was 2 sizes too big. Mom had cut her hair short and dyed it brown at a cheap drugstore. Zephyr wore no makeup, her eyes were puffy, and she clutched a knockoff purse like it was her only lifeline. I met them in a small glass room. There was no water, no coffee. Celine stood quietly outside the door. Dad spoke first, his voice shaking. "Murian, you're my daughter. I know we hurt you. We don't deserve anything, but we have nowhere else to turn. The apartment lease ends in 6 weeks. We'll be on the street." Mom stared at the table, twisting a tissue into tiny pieces. Zephyr finally looked up, eyes red. "Please, just enough to get us a fresh start. We'll sign anything. We'll never ask again." I opened a slim black folder and put 3 business cards on the polished wood. The first card: Oren Kale, certified financial planner who helps people recover after going bankrupt. The second card: a free 8-week program about money and debt at the East San Jose Community Center, paid for by the foundation. The third card: crisis hotline and a local therapist who takes sliding scale payments. I pushed the cards toward them. "This is what the Thorn Foundation can do for strangers who lost everything through no fault of their own. It's the same help we offer anyone who comes in broke and scared," I said. Dad's hand shook as he reached for the cards, then stopped halfway. "That's it? After 32 years, that's all you have for your own father?" he whispered. I stood. "You had choices. You chose to spend the trust fund recklessly. You chose to chase risky returns that sounded too good to be true. You chose to stay silent when Zephyr humiliated me for fun. Those were your choices, not mine." Mom finally looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "We were wrong. We're so sorry," she said. I met her eyes for the first time in almost 2 years. "I believe you're sorry now," I said. "But sorry doesn't rebuild a life. Work does. Courage does. Taking responsibility does." Zephyr started crying loudly and messily. "You enjoy this. You want us to suffer." I walked to the door and held it open. "No," I answered. "I just refuse to pay for your suffering anymore." Security escorted them out. Dad never looked back. Mom whispered one last time, "I'm sorry." As the elevator doors closed, Zephyr cried until they reached the lobby. Celine handed me a tissue I didn't realize I needed. They'll be okay, she said quietly. People who hit bottom either stay there or start climbing. You just gave them the only ladder we're allowed to give. I nodded, watching the rain streak down the windows. For the first time in a long while, the ache in my chest was gone. Not replaced by happiness, not replaced by joy, just space. Room to breathe. The sky over East Palo Alto was gray, the color of steel on opening day. The new building's second home rose like a promise. 4 stories of glass and redwood wrapped around a courtyard, where kids were already chasing each other between planter boxes full of rosemary and kale. 3,000 people filled the plaza. Families who would live there, donors, city council members, and even the governor who was cutting the ribbon. I stood backstage in a simple black suit, my heart hammering louder than the marching band warming up. Gray squeezed my hand once. Ella Laner, dressed elegantly in white, gave me a small nod from the front row. This was the project I had worked for. 200 permanent supportive apartments, an on-site medical clinic, a job training center, a preschool, a rooftop farm, and a rule that no one would ever be turned away for lack of paperwork. The mayor finished his speech. The crowd cheered when my name was called. I walked to the podium. The microphone felt heavier than any trust document I had ever signed. I looked out over the sea of faces. Near the back, almost hidden behind a column, stood Thayer, Seraphine, and Zephra. Dad wore an old navy coat that hung loose on his frame. Mom clutched a paper cup of coffee like it might disappear. Zephra had cut her hair short and looked small without the armor of designer labels. I let the silence settle for 3 full seconds. Then I began, my voice steady. 1 year ago tonight, I was thrown out of the only home I had ever known with 1 suitcase and no place to go. I learned that night what it feels like when the people who are supposed to catch you let you fall instead. A ripple went through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. I also learned something else that freezing night on a park bench. The real family isn't DNA. Real family is the stranger who sees you when everyone else ignores you. Real family is the hand that reaches out when you have nothing left to give. Real family is love without asking for anything in return. I turned and gestured to the building behind me. This is my second home. 200 families will never again have to sleep in their cars because a landlord raised the rent. Kids will never again do homework in the backseat because the lights got shut off. And every single person who walks through those doors will be told the same thing I needed to hear that Christmas Eve. You are not disposable. You are not alone. You are home. The applause started slowly, then exploded. People stood. Phones rose like a wave of light. I waited for it to crest, then spoke again, softly so every microphone strained to catch it. Tonight, we open these doors for every person who has ever been told they don't belong, especially for those who were told it by the people who were supposed to love them most. I looked straight across the plaza, directly at the 3 figures in the back. Dad's shoulders shook. Mom covered her mouth. Zephra stared at the ground. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I simply held their gaze for 1 heartbeat longer than comfort allowed. Then I stepped away from the podium. The governor cut the ribbon. The marching band struck up. Children rushed forward with flowers. Reporters shouted questions I pretended not to hear. I walked down the steps through the crowd that parted like water and headed for the main entrance. Thayer tried to step forward. Muron. I kept walking. Not fast. Not slow. Just forward. Mom reached out a hand that never touched me. Zephra opened her mouth, closed it, and for the first time in her life said nothing at all. I passed within 2 feet of them without breaking stride. The massive redwood doors of second home opened automatically as I approached. Warm light spilled out onto the concrete. I crossed the threshold. The doors closed behind me with a soft, final sound. I never looked back. Not because I hated them. Not because I needed to prove anything. But because I finally understood forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door that hurt you. Sometimes it simply means walking through a new one and letting the old one stay shut. Inside, a little boy in a Spider-Man jacket tugged my sleeve. "Are you the lady who built this place?" he asked. I knelt down so we were eye to eye. "I'm one of them," I said. He offered me a dandelion he had picked from the courtyard. "For you, because you gave us a home." I took the flower and, for the first time in a long while, I smiled like I really meant it. Outside, the celebration continued. Inside the second home, the future began.